The dining room felt unusually quiet that evening. The mahogany table gleamed under the warm chandelier light, set with the good china that only came out for special occasions. I smoothed my pale blue dress and took a steadying breath as I entered the room where my husband's family had gathered for our monthly dinner. 8 years. That's how long I had been part of this family. 8 years of birthday celebrations, holiday traditions, and Sunday dinners. 8 years of trying to fit into a circle that always seemed just a little too small for me. My husband David sat at the head of the table, his dark hair catching the light as he laughed at something his brother Mark had said. His mother, Patricia, was arranging flowers in a crystal vase, her movements precise and deliberate. His sister-in-law, Rebecca, was checking her phone with that familiar smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. "Sarah, dear, please sit down," Patricia said without looking up from her flowers. Her tone was honey-sweet, but I had learned to recognize the steel beneath it. I took my usual seat, the one closest to the kitchen, so I could help serve when needed. It was a position I had accepted gracefully over the years, understanding my role in the family hierarchy. David's father, Robert, nodded at me briefly before returning to his conversation with Mark about the stock market. The first course arrived, a butternut squash soup that Patricia had made from scratch. The conversation flowed around me as it usually did, touching on work gossip, neighborhood news, and family updates. I contributed when asked directly, but mostly I listened, observing the familiar dynamics that had shaped these dinners for nearly a decade. "Sarah," Rebecca said suddenly, her voice cutting through the gentle chatter, "I've been meaning to ask you about something." The table fell silent. David looked up from his soup, confusion creasing his brow. Patricia's spoon paused midway to her mouth. Even Robert turned his attention toward us, which was unusual. "Of course," I replied, setting down my spoon. "What is it?" Rebecca reached for her purse, a designer bag that she had mentioned cost more than my monthly salary. She pulled out her phone and began scrolling through it with deliberate slowness. The silence stretched uncomfortably long. "Well," she began, her eyes gleaming with what I could only describe as triumph, "I was downtown last Tuesday and I saw the most interesting thing." My stomach began to tighten. I could feel David's eyes on me, questioning and concerned. Patricia had set down her spoon entirely now, her full attention focused on Rebecca. "I saw you," Rebecca continued, "at that little cafe on 5th Street, the one with the outdoor seating." "Yes," I said carefully. "I meet clients there sometimes." "It's convenient," Rebecca's smile widened. "Oh, but this wasn't about work, was it? You were with a man, a very handsome man, and you seemed quite intimate." The word hung in the air like a challenge. David's face had gone pale, and I could see his hands clenching on the table. Patricia's mouth had formed a thin line of disapproval. "Rebecca," I started, but she held up her hand. "Oh, I'm not finished," she said, her voice growing stronger. "Because you see, I've been keeping track. This isn't the first time I've seen you with other men." She began swiping through her phone, and I realized with growing horror that she was showing photographs. Pictures of me at various locations around the city, always with a man, always looking engaged in conversation. "Here you are at the park last month," she said, sliding her phone across the table so everyone could see. "And here's another one from 2 weeks ago at that wine bar downtown." The photographs made their way around the table. Patricia gasped audibly at one of them. Robert's face darkened with anger. David wouldn't even look at the phone when it reached him. "Your precious wife with other men," Rebecca said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. 8 years of family loyalty shattered in seconds. The words hit exactly as she had intended them to. I could feel their judgment crushing me, their disappointment settling over the table like a heavy blanket. My fingers were trembling as I reached for my purse, and I could see Rebecca's satisfaction at my obvious distress. They had no idea what I was about to unleash, I thought to myself as I slowly opened my bag. "You're right, Rebecca," I said quietly. "These photographs do tell a story." I pulled out a thick manila folder and set it gently on the table. The family watched in confused silence as I opened it and began removing documents. The first man you photographed, I began, my voice growing steadier with each word, is James Morrison. He's a private investigator. I placed a business card on the table. I hired him 3 months ago when I discovered that someone had been accessing my personal accounts and following me around the city. Patricia's face began to change color. Rebecca's smile flickered. The second man, I continued, removing another document, is Thomas Chen, a forensic accountant. I hired him when I realized that money was being transferred from accounts that only family members had access to. David finally looked up, his confusion evident. Sarah, what are you talking about? I placed a bank statement on the table, several transactions highlighted in yellow. Someone has been systematically stealing from the emergency fund that David and I set up for his parents' care. Small amounts at first, but growing bolder over time. The room had gone completely silent now. Even Rebecca had stopped smirking. The third man you photographed is Detective Williams from the Financial Crimes Unit, I said, placing his card next to the others. Because, you see, what started as family theft became something much more serious when forged signatures appeared on several legal documents. I looked directly at Patricia, whose face had gone ashen. Documents that would have transferred David's inheritance to other family members upon his parents' death. Robert stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. What are you saying? I pulled out the final set of documents, photocopies of forged signatures and falsified legal papers. I'm saying that while Rebecca was busy following me around with her camera, thinking she was gathering evidence of my infidelity, she was actually documenting my investigation into the systematic betrayal of your son by his own family. The truth settled over the table like a cold fog. Patricia's hands were shaking as she reached for the documents. Rebecca had gone completely silent, her phone forgotten on the table. Every man in those photographs was helping me build a case against the people who were supposed to love and protect my husband, I said. People who instead saw him as nothing more than a source of money to be manipulated and stolen from. David's voice was barely a whisper. Mom, Rebecca, is this true? The silence that followed was answer enough. I gathered my documents and stood up slowly. Betrayal did teach me something, I said, looking around the table at their shocked faces. It taught me that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones you need to watch most carefully. I walked to the door, pausing only to look back at my husband. The detective will be contacting everyone involved next week. David, when you're ready to talk about what comes next, I'll be at home. As I left that dining room for the last time, I realized that 8 years of feeling like an outsider had finally made sense. Sometimes being on the outside is exactly where you need to be to see the truth.